As of today, Rolex is known as the absolute king of watchmaking and marketing, making some of the most popular and in-demand timepieces of all time. But it wasn't always like this. Rolex wasn't always a brand that showed wealth and success, and the story of how it got to this point is one you need to hear. You see, it all started in the early 1900s when a man by the name of Hans Wilsdorf had an idea for a unique and new watch brand. Hans was an orphan living in England, living out his dream of making watches. He was becoming more and more skilled as the years went on, becoming inspired by the rise of pocket watches to create something new, versatile, and unique. And create that he did. According to one of his old stories, he was riding a horse-drawn omnibus in London, like every other person looking to get around at the time, when a genie whispered the name Rolex into his ear. He had no idea what it meant at the time, but with his drive to create his own watch brand, he trademarked the strange name in 1908, officially marking the beginning of Rolex. As World War I loomed in England just 6 years after this, Hans knew that he needed to execute like never before if he wanted his new company to survive. With this thought constantly in mind, Hans wirelessly worked on wristwatches between 1908 and 1914, with the first ever wristwatch receiving Class A certification by the Kew Observatory being one from Rolex. They were growing at a rapid rate, with over 40 employees by the time World War I came around. With the darkness and uncertainty of war came opportunity for Hans and Rolex, as he moved the headquarters to Switzerland, which ended up being the best decision of his entire life. Switzerland was the center of watchmaking, and moving the headquarters there only meant higher profits and quality for Rolex. By the time World War I ended and Rolex was heading into the mid-1920s, they were ready to make the biggest innovation the watchmaking world had ever seen. Up to this point, they were making dressy wristwatches in precious metals similar to other luxury watch brands at the time. However, in 1926, they did the absolute unthinkable. The world's first waterproof wristwatch. Everyone thought it could not be done, that there was no way a mechanical movement could survive being submerged in water. Hearing the doubts and concerns of the customer base, the kings of marketing proved how smart they truly were when they challenged their watchmaking by asking a woman to swim the entire English Channel with a waterproof Rolex watch. In what people thought was a miracle, the watch lasted the full 10 hours of the swim across the channel, completely unharmed. It was called the greatest triumph in all of watchmaking, and the news spread at rapid rates. Over the 20s and 30s, Rolex became a brand known for pushing the limits and succeeding in everything. Which is why if you want to succeed in everything, you should hit that subscribe button down below. And after cementing themselves as the brand of innovation and change, they produced the world's first perpetual rotor mechanism for watch movements in 1931, something that every single watch brand uses to this day. Their watches were always on the wrist of the most successful and innovative people ever. Whether it was flying over Mount Everest or becoming the fastest driver in the world, a Rolex was almost always on the watch of choice. As they built a real name for themselves during this short time period, it was about to be time for their most famous models to be born, and for Rolex to take its crown as the king of watchmaking. After Rolex had exploded onto the luxury watch scene by innovating like no other brand before and providing timepieces to the heroes of the Second World War, they were ready for their complete takeover. They provided Rolex Oyster Perpetual models to seamen fighting and Rolex Air King watches to the pilots in the Battle of Britain. After word had spread of their helping in defeating the Axis powers with their incredible timepieces, they instantly became associated with greatness, success, and the crown. In 1945, Rolex would release its most popular model to date, the Datejust, a watch with a special bracelet crafted specifically for that model called the Jubilee bracelet as a nod to their 40-year anniversary, and a fluted bezel that make it immediately recognizable as a Rolex. This watch became the timepiece of choice for the world's greatest leaders and minds. Winston Churchill and Martin Luther King were just some of the many famous leaders sporting the Rolex Datejust during this time. By the 1950s, Rolex was everywhere. From prime ministers to race car drivers and divers, to even the team of people climbing the world's tallest mountain, Mount Everest, Rolex made a special model for this ambitious group climbing the mountain, similar to what they did for the pilots in World War II. The new model was called the Rolex Explorer. Since the mountain is covered in snow and they needed to have the most precise timekeeping in order to reach the summit, Rolex made a dark black dial watch with lume that made it impossible to read the time when it was light, dark, or even with snow blowing in their faces. Rolex would later release this watch to the public with a famous story behind it, making it an instant classic with a rich and exciting history of human exploration. With their progress in watchmaking on land, they decided to show even more of their watchmaking skills with the release of the Submariner, the most popular watch of all time. It was completely waterproof up to 100 meters, had a perpetual movement, and a rotatable bezel, so divers could track the time they were underwater. Rolex was becoming the true king amongst the watch world by crafting the top-of-the-line tool watches for the most brave and ambitious explorers and symbols of power and success for world leaders with a Datejust. Every model has a feel and story of its own, but all connected under one everlasting legacy. In that same year, Rolex released their next timepiece, the GMT Master. This watch changed everything for the brand. The two-tone bezel and complication could not have had a better look, and it was released at the perfect time, just as commercial flight started to boom. When humans innovated, whether it was underwater, on summits of the tallest mountains, or even making the first transcontinental flight, Rolex was there, always with the perfect tool watch to serve the innovators. The GMT Master made it possible to know the local time and a time from anywhere else in the world, making it the ultimate commercial pilot's watch. This era of Rolex, where all of their most popular models were born, is where they really took the throne as the king of watchmaking, and something that made this era even better was the availability of the pieces. Today, Rolex is notorious for having a complicated waitlist system that can make it really difficult to obtain the piece you want. Most ADs play strange games where you have to purchase other watches from other brands in order to obtain the Rolex watch you want. However, it's very important to remember that it was not always like this, and for a really long period of time, Rolex watches were readily available. This meant that you could walk into basically any Rolex store on the planet and walk out with your favorite watch that same day. Datejusts, Submariners, and even Daytonas along with GMT Masters were all available to purchase same day as long as the store had it in stock, of course. This era is what Rolex enthusiasts and watch collectors want to go back to so desperately because building a collection didn't have to take years. It could take however long as you like. This system is not a testament to the popularity of Rolex, as by the 1980s, it was definitely the most popular watch brand in the world, and had taken its crown as the king of luxury watches. Every model had its own story and iconic meaning, which is exactly what made Rolex so special. Everything in the catalog was loved by everyone, and it felt that Rolex was incapable of making a bad watch. As this era continued, they kept up with their amazing marketing and innovation, making a new Explorer model that was more functional and versatile than the last, and dive watches that could go underwater for longer and at greater depths than ever before. Rolex would continue their prowess into the 21st century, where they enhanced their movements even further. They were using 904L steel to its full capability and had developed the Kerachron bezel, a ceramic bezel for their dive watches. It provided a new, shiny, and glossy look to increase visual appearance and function, making the bezel much easier to read underwater, and most importantly, never fading and never scratching. Their most impressive moment of the pre-Waitlist era came in 2012, when they officially released the Rolex Skydweller, their most complicated watch ever. It features a dual time zone with an annual calendar with a date wheel, and a really cool command system with the bezel. It truly showed that Rolex wasn't just for show, and that they could most certainly make a very complicated piece that showed off their innovation skills. The very next year, they introduced the Kerachron bezel to the GMT Master 2, which really set that watch over the edge. It now looked absolutely incredible, and each model developed nicknames given by Rolex's most loyal fans and enthusiasts. As Rolex continued to refine movements, better their marketing, and allow their fans to hype up Rolex as the best watch brand of all time, the demand skyrocketed like nobody could have ever predicted. During this time, it became normal that the really in-demand pieces like the Panda Daytona and Pepsi GMT Master may have a waitlist. But before anyone could catch up, it was every single Rolex piece that had an insane demand, thus entering us into the pandemic and modern era. After a few years of seeing the really in-demand pieces get a waitlist, Rolex was doing everything they could to fulfill the wants of their clients, until one of the most insane things happened throughout the world. The pandemic shut down absolutely everything. Watch production, authorized dealers, Rolex corporate, basically the entire company has shut down. Meaning that the supply went down while the demand only increased since everyone was now sharing their watches all over social media. Rolex had no choice but to have a waitlist for every single piece, and slowly but surely, things started to open back up for the brand and world as a whole, but the demand was only rising. Rolex had no way of fulfilling every single order or request, so this was the only option they could resort to. Unfortunately, a lot of Rolex ADs took advantage of this and started playing stupid games with customers to try and get them to spend more money to get a Rolex, which has led to a lot of distrust for these stores. Overall, it's put a small dent into Rolex's brand identity, but the demand is still there, and that can be reflected with the secondary market. Now, the prices are not nearly as high as they were during the pandemic when everyone thought the world was going to end, but they are still significantly higher than retail. This entire experience from the pandemic has led Rolex to refine how they allocate watches and their order of business in a sense. They are actively shutting down any authorized dealers accused of not following through with company protocol, as the brand continues to innovate and dominate the watch world with new models, movements, dials, and creations. It's safe to say that the pandemic changed the entire outlook of Rolex and forced them to make big changes in order to stay on their throne. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss one of my watch videos, as I'm going to be posting a lot more just like this very soon. And before you click off, comment what your favorite Rolex model is and why you think it's the best one. With that being said, I'll see you in the next one.